for that lovely introduction, and very good to be here. So I am talking today about the Buddha Amitabha, who actually, well, he's been placed on the shrine because of this talk, but our main rupa on the shrine is actually an Amitabha figure as well. That's a figure of Amitabha. And I'm doing that as part of the series that we have at the moment on what's termed the 5 Buddha Mandala. So this year so far there's been a sort of introduction to the theme of the year, which is the mandala, a mandala. And then Ratnaprabha introduced the 5 Buddha Mandala. And so far there have been talks on Ratnasambhava by Dayabhadra, and then also by Akshobhya last month, which was Bodhi Leela. And so this is the third of the 5 Buddha Mandala talks that's coming up. And so Amitabha, and it was interesting to me because often, you know, as we develop in our spiritual lives, we develop sort of relationships with different figures or different aspects. And for me, that isn't Amitabha. You know, that's been particularly a different figure who's coming up in your series mostly. But I always really love it when I'm asked to give a talk on something that I haven't talked on before, maybe haven't reflected on that much, and that would be the case here. So it's been, you know, real sort of pleasure and a privilege really to have that impetus to reflect a bit more on Amitabha as a figure, and also the different associations with him. And I mean, he is a really key figure anyway. He's known as the Buddha of infinite light, and he is particularly for one school of Mahayana Buddhism, he is the key figure, and on the understanding that if you call to mind, chant the mantra of, reflect on the figure of Amitabha, that will give rise to a rebirth in a pure land, Sukhavati, in which it's much easier to gain enlightenment. So there are lots but as it is with all of these figures, they all have lots of different associations. And obviously they're things that you can research. There are lots of talks, there's lots written about them. So the idea really, I think, with these talks, and certainly for me now, is more some of those aspects of him that resonate with me. So what I want to do is draw out, well, I'm not sure if there are 3 or 4, but you know, because there are sub-aspects, but there's 3 different aspects that I wanted to talk about with Amitabha that particularly resonate with me. I mean, and I'll just say what they are, and then I'm going to talk a bit about each of them in turn. And the first of them is that each of the Buddhas in the 5 Buddha Mandala is associated with a particular time of day. And Amitabha is associated with sunset, and his colour is red. So that's the red of the sunset, and that's his association. And so I want to talk a bit about that, and particularly he's also very, very crucially associated with love. But I'm going to, so that's sort of, I mean, that's one aspect that I want to talk about. And then also each of the Buddha figures is associated with a particular aspect of wisdom. And so I think you might have heard about that with Ratnasambhava and Amitabha. Amitabha, for example, is associated with mirror-like wisdom, seeing things, Akshobhya, with mirror-like wisdom, seeing things as they really are. And Amitabha's wisdom associated is discriminating wisdom. And I'm going to say a little bit about that and how that resonates with me. And then finally, the aspect I wanted to talk about was this: he's in what's called the mudra of meditation. It's a meditating Buddha with his hands like this and the thumbs gently touching. So I'll talk a bit in the third bit around meditation as well. And within that, I'm hoping to weave in a bit about his associated animal, which is a peacock. So those are the different aspects. But first of all, the sort of time of day. And when I was reflecting on him, I was quite enjoying an image of combining reflecting on him as the Buddha of love, or being associated with love, and then this time of day of sunset. And because when I was thinking about the sunset, I mean, it varies hugely for a start, but also with a sunset, if it's ever changing. You've got lots of different colours in there, so you can have that sort of deep red that's associated with Amitabha, but there may also be oranges and yellows, and little different things being lit up at different moments. You might get slants of light through the clouds depending on where you are, and that made me think in terms of the sort of weaving in the love is also around the Brahma Viharas, which you may or may not have come across. But the Brahma Viharas, or sublime abodes, are different aspects of love, and very particularly, you will, I think, all be familiar with metta, as a concept, and to some greater or lesser extent, as also as an experience. This idea of love that is, it's we have so many associations with love, don't we? But love that's beyond a sort of romantic love or dutiful love or love of a family, but that sense of a universal loving kindness towards all beings. And when I was thinking about it in terms of the sunset analogy, well, you've got the Brahma Viharas, you've got, that obviously the first of them is metta, it's this loving heart, the love. And then the second of them is karuna, compassion, which is, and compassion, karuna, is what arises naturally when a loving heart meets suffering. So loving heart meets suffering and compassion arises. And so I was thinking of that as part of the colours in the sunset, that actually this light of love is honing in on a being or a situation where there is pain, there is suffering, and then that can be lit up in a certain way with a certain hue of the sort of sunsets of reds and oranges. And also within the Brahma Viharas, the next one is mudita, or sympathetic joy, and that is mudita is what arises when a loving heart meets joy, success, happiness. It's that response as well. And I think it's really important to have all of these hues present in this sunset, because what can happen is that we can end up experiencing quite a sort of narrow range emotionally, and particularly when it comes to love. And that sometimes when there is suffering present, there's all sorts of things can happen. We can for example, feel that we need to solve it, and that might make us feel unable to, or impotent, and then feel bad about ourselves and our lack of capacity to solve it. We can also fall into, there's a sort of term that we use quite a lot within Triratna, which is horrified anxiety, which actually is, I find, a really helpful term. It's very sort of descriptive, but it is that sense of it's too much and something in us becomes horrified. And I think a lot of the way that we can know what's going on in response to suffering is to be really aware of what's happening in the body. Because when we talk about the sort of the love and this sort of, in a way, this sort of infinite light and love falling on suffering, when that's coming from metta, when it's coming from a loving heart, what's arising is compassion. It's just this natural arising of, can feel it in a sort of heart way. It's likely to feel open, there might be a poignancy, but you can be quite relaxed with it. There may well be sadness. It's not that it's an emotionally neutral feeling, but it can also be energizing, and it can give rise, it can open the possibility of appropriately responding to the situation, because there's an openness. And whereas with sort of horrified anxiety or this needing to solve it, it tends to feel quite closed, that we'll go like, oh, like that. And it will create a barrier to a helpful, spontaneous response to whatever situation it is. So I really like that imagery, really, with the sunset and the different hues of reds and oranges and yellows, and just this sense of sometimes you can really see something lit up in the sunset, and it's something where, oh, there's suffering there, but there's love meeting it, and that gives rise to all sorts of possibilities that are very much open to and sort of engaging close to the situation. And another way often of which is linked to this sort of mudita, with a loving heart meeting some sort of success or joy or happiness, is that sometimes we might feel, oh, we're very, that there's a lot of empathy and response because we feel a strong response to suffering. But actually, do we feel such a strong response to joy as well, to happiness? That's again that thing of where there is metta present, it can equally, this sort of light, these hues of the sunset can fall on, joy, success, people, where people are, what they want is what is happening for them. And that then there is a really natural response of, wow, how lovely, that's what's going well for them. So that's why I like this sort of imagery, really, of the sort of light of the sunset falling on the suffering and also on the joys, and enabling us to respond in different ways. The fourth of the Brahma Viharas is equanimity, and I wondered if that was like when you get the sort of sunset and it's just really broad and diffuse colours right across the whole of the sky, and there's more a sense of, life consists of all of these things, of suffering, of joy, of all of these different aspects, and it can all just be there in this sort of wonderful display. And where there is, a sense of love meeting that, it's just what is, there's no need, it just is what is. So that's one of the bits that I was enjoying reflecting on in response to Amitabha and to the sunset and the Buddha of love. And the other aspect that I was enjoying is this, as I say, each of them has an associated with aspect of wisdom. I think one of the things that's just in general with the five Buddha mandala, and actually indeed with the sort of spiritual life, is that they're all like different ways in, they're different views in on the spiritual life and on what's needed. And I think there's one analogy where, there's within the spiritual life, there's lots of different paths up the mountain, where the mountain might be going towards enlightenment, towards awakening. And there are lots of different paths that may be very different. And as you get closer, they converge more, going up a mountain. And it's the same with the five Buddha mandala. In a way, they're all just different ways in. So these wisdom aspects are just aspects of wisdom. It's not that one is better than another. Some will resonate more with you at different points in your spiritual life. And but with the sort of discriminating wisdom, it's about being aware of the uniqueness of everyone and everything. And so that's why I was sort of drawing that aspect out in the Metta Bhavana that we did just before the tea break. And it was interesting when I started it was interesting to me anyway, it might not be to you, but when I started reflecting on, this discriminating wisdom, because it doesn't immediately resonate with me. So it was interesting to sort of go into it a bit more in terms of what is my response to that. And my initial way into it is that I've been really enjoying trees recently, over the last few months. I just seem to be more aware of trees. And every so often I'll be out walking and be like, wow, and there's just a particular angle of a branch or the pattern of the bark on a tree or, any different aspect of it, and it can be something really quite small. but they, and it's always just striking me like, wow, that's something that is, and I suppose it is sort of seeing its uniqueness, though, that that sort of detail of that particular tree or that particular curve of a branch. And it's not that, oh, that's particularly beautiful, or that's what a tree should look like, or anything like that. It's more just like, oh wow, there's a sort of engagement in that particular unique aspect of that particular tree. So then, but then I was sort of relating that more to people, because obviously that's a sort of a huge aspect of our lives. And one of the things I was thinking about in terms of the value of this wisdom of seeing the uniqueness and the qualities of all people is that I think, it's a bit like we can live in quite a narrow, safe emotional range. But similarly with people, we can engage with, it's almost like you're engaging with a sort of cardboard cutout of that person, or you're so familiar with them that you see them this way, or you meet this particular aspect of them in the family or in work, and relate to that particular aspect of them as well. So then I thought, oh, there's such a huge value in this thing of the discriminating wisdom, of really sort of that sense of opening to the sort of breadth and depth of different people, different individuals. And partly, again, it's this response of love, because when we're taken interest and we're really, really interested, that is a very, that comes with warmth, it comes with a sense of, kindly interest with love. But more than anything, it's that sense of being, just much more open, just much more curious. It's like, and it sort of links very much to sort of the core, teachings in Buddhism of where everything arises depending on certain conditions, and as those conditions change, what arises changes as those conditions cease. Things cease, but the sort of the weight of everything. I have a sort of picture of it like a huge wave, really, of everything that has brought us into being in terms of who we are right now and all the different aspects of that. So it's not just family conditioning from our own parents, but really from their parents and going back generations and generations in terms of what influenced them and then conditions us, but then also position within siblings, within a family, sort of early nurturing, and then later on sort of very much conditioned, particularly often in adolescence, with that whole thing of becoming much more socially aware, which can lead to, oh, I don't fit in, I'm not right, I'm this, or I'm that, or I'm better, I'm worse, all that sort of comparing ourselves to people. So there is this incredible amount of factors that bring us into being as who we are in this moment. And that's a uniqueness. There are other wisdoms, which are the wisdoms of seeing what reunites us as human beings, but very much the wisdom of Amitabha is seeing, all of that uniqueness that helps us, manifest as we are right now, and to be curious about that in each other, so wow, there's all of these different things. Sometimes people respond in ways that just are a complete anathema to us, it's like, how can you hear that and think that, or see that and think that, and it's just like, it's because we just do. It's because we may not know why we do. I mean, I have that, I might sort of suddenly react to something and think, wow, that's a sort of weirdly strong reaction to that particular thing, and it's just some aspect of, conditioning that's happened. So that's that sort of second aspect of it. So discriminating wisdom. And then the third aspect that I wanted to talk about is meditation, and this sort of, because he's in this sort of mudra of meditation, which I do find sort of deeply attractive anyway, meditation was sort of what first drew me into a Buddhist path. It was very much a sort of, and this was in, as Prasada Sara was saying, it was in 1990. And at that time, I didn't know anybody who meditated, and it just seemed like a really weird thing to do. And or if I heard someone talk about meditation, it would be like, oh, and I didn't know what questions to ask. It just felt quite interesting and drew me, but I didn't quite know how to engage with it. And then I went to Nepal in 1990, and we went to go trekking, but it was like we were in the East. It's where people meditate, and then saw introduction to meditation retreat advertised. So did that for 4 or 5 days, which weirdly was led by Triratna. So it was quite easy to engage with Triratna when I got back. And I did have an immediate response to meditation. I remember at the end of that sort of, whatever it was, few days, feeling like I'd been sort of plugged into the mains and charged with electricity, and then also given a battery charger to take home because I knew how to meditate, or at least principally I did. So there was always that sort of huge response. Meditation's always been, as I say, my sort of path and way in with Buddhist spiritual practice. And I still find it very absorbing. But I was thinking about it particularly in relation to Amitabha, and particularly in relation to both this sort of sunset and the Brahma Viharas and responding, but also to this discriminating wisdom and awareness of the uniqueness of all people, and really opening to that, but also in terms of what I was reading out in the before the meditation, in terms of this quote from Rumi, of which is, "Your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it." So I just wanted to unpack that a bit as well, because partly because I find that it does link to this idea of the sunset and the love and the infinite life and light and love of Amitabha, and sort of resting into that being, in a way, the natural order of things. And the reason that we don't experience that all the time is because of this the barriers that we build against it. And this may be something that you feel quite conscious of, or it may not. But it's like all of these things that have happened to us in our lives, like I was mentioning, so part of the conditioning factor is often hitting adolescence and becoming more socially aware, and then what happens and how people respond to us. But all of those things, or all the wounds that happen to us, early life, adolescence or beyond, it's almost like we can sort of brick ourselves up to be a bit more safe. So they've all been sort of bricks in the wall. It's that song, isn't it? But there's we're sort of walling ourselves in to feel a bit more safe, a bit more secure, a bit less vulnerable to hurt. And also I can see them sometimes as it's more like, so sometimes it's like bricks, or sometimes it's like layers of an onion that we need to shed. But it's like, so it's not that we need to, in a way, generate love, change this, change that, but it's more that we need to it's more that thing of seeing, oh right, okay, that's why I don't respond in this way. So it's a bit like also talking about when a loving heart meets suffering. It's natural, it's easeful, it's relaxed. It's maybe it feels sad, maybe it feels poignant, maybe it's not entirely easy, but there's a relaxation, there's an ease there. But actually, if we're thinking, oh no, I don't want that to happen, or this, whenever we're sort of tightened up, it's hard to respond. So we can wall ourselves in and protect ourselves. And I think meditation is a really helpful context for seeing that, because we're just sitting there, turning attention, being with what it is to be this human being in this moment, noticing all the things that are arising in our mind, noticing what's arising in terms of emotions. It's a bit, it can be termed sometimes as putting ourselves under a microscope. So you're really looking at what's actually going on right now. So we can see much more clearly, what's happening. So in a way, meditation is a really helpful way to do that thing of seeking and finding the barriers within ourselves that we've built against love and allowing them to dissolve, to open up a bit more. And also within that, which I think sort of links to this a bit, is the peacock that I wanted to bring in. So each of the Buddhas in the 5 Buddha mandala is also associated with a particular animal. And Amitabha is associated with the peacock. And within the sort of mythology of the peacock, there is this idea that it achieves its vibrant colour by consuming poisonous snakes, for example. And so, I sort of saw this as a sort of 3B point, the sort of the peacock within meditation, of just like we have this laboratory, we have this space where we're sitting. We're seeing what perhaps what the barriers are to love. We're opening to that, but also this sense of transforming poisons, which is associated with the peacock, which is associated with the animal associated with Amitabha. And but I think it's really interesting with what gets termed sort of poisons, and particularly when we're looking at emotions. Because again, it can be quite easy to categorize emotions as either good or bad or wanted or not wanted. And so there might be a sense of, I shouldn't feel this. This is a bad emotion. I shouldn't, there's anger here, there's sadness here, there's, and emotions that are harder to feel. But actually within that transformation, it's really like the sense of, there are no bad emotions. There's just emotion, and there's just what's present. So there is this sense again within meditation that it can give us an environment, a space that is can hold this thing of just being able to sit with whatever is arising in the way of emotion. Oh, right, there's rage, there's or infuriate injustice, there's a depression, there's whatever's happening there. Within meditation, there is this sense of being balanced, spacious, open, and we can simply allow whatever is there in the emotional field to be there, to be felt. And in a way, there's nothing else to do. It can sort of transform itself when we allow things to be present. We're not trying to push them away, which can create more bricks in the wall. They can just percolate and sort of transform themselves, really. It's just energy. That energy of rage can turn into energy. It can be part of that red, infinite light of the sunset falling on whatever it's falling on, with a sense of the heart, with metta, with compassion. And so that sort of response of transforming it into just a response of energy, of compassion, of which is a more helpful response to whatever it is that's there. So those are the 3 aspects that I wanted to really focus on with Amitabha, who is he's the Buddha. Well, he's in the West because he's associated with the setting sun, and as a figure he's red, associated with love, infinite light, sunset. So I wanted to focus on that and the sort of different hues of the sunset and the different hues that love takes when it meets whatever it meets in human life, the sort of infinite variety of experiences of human life. And then also this distinguishing wisdom. and to really unpick that as seeing the uniqueness in everyone and in everything, whether it's the bark of a tree or way a branch is twisted towards the light, or however, we ourselves twist towards the light in our own particular ways, in our own particular lives. And then also a bit about meditation and the meditation mudra. But you've got that hands and the idea that the thumbs are just touching, so it's connected but not pushing. And that sense that meditation can create for us a container in which we can allow this awareness of the love, the loving heart, the distinguishing wisdom, and all that it is to be a human being, including allowing what can be termed sort of poisons to be transformed and to experience the energy of them. I'm going to stop there. But there is time for questions. We've got, I think, 12 minutes. So if anybody has other questions, or if anybody is up for sharing their own experience or anything that resonates, but also anything that isn't clear or you'd like unpacked a little bit more.
Could you say a little bit more about the horrified anxiety? Because that isn't a phrase that I've heard before, but it's quite punchy.
Yeah. Does it conjure anything up for you that when it's just said like that, or?
I think there's a sense of kind of repulsion about it as well, like drawing away and and I guess how you kind of overcome that and actually bring wisdom and kindness to those situations.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and that is exactly what it is. I mean, so I mean, obviously, anxiety is such a huge thing, in us, in society, anyway, isn't it? And it's fueled by lots of things, the news, everything, which partly what's actually happening, and also how it's brought to us. So there is, that can, and horrified anxiety is really just putting it up a notch. We're horror, and you can actually feel that. You can think, that there's horror. Horrified anxiety is exactly what you've said, and I think part of it is that, I mean, I do find it really, and it's not simple to do, but simple to feel and explain from a sort of Buddhist spiritual practice meeting the world state, is that, anxiety anyway, it makes us close, but it also closes to us, to fear for us and this, there's a threat, and it's like that, and it makes us less able to respond. And horrified anxiety even more so, because it's just up a notch, and it's just like, I cannot go there, that is too much. And actually, I cannot go there, that's too much, may well be a valid response, at times. It depends on our own particular, capacity and support and what's happening, and for, and particularly where there's trauma or something, that might well be a very, logical and helpful response to that. I'm just not going to go there for now. But how we bring that into, what your supplementary question is how do we respond with kindness, compassion, wisdom to these things, is basically practice, because it's like, that's why I love this, the clarity of, compassion is what arises when a loving heart meets suffering. So what we're doing is allowing that cultivation of a loving heart through practice, and then trusting that when that meets difficulty, the more that we experience the fruits of that practice, the more that we will be able to respond with that sort of, with kindness and wisdom. I mean, I may have quoted this before, even here, but I was really struck by, one of the sort of senior Triratna teachers is called Vasantra, who you may or may not have heard talks by him, but I did a 3-month retreat with him 6 years ago. And I remember clearly one of the things that he said, and I think he said this in a one-to-one interaction with me, was that he didn't feel that he could be surprised or horrified by anything that a human being could do to another anymore. And that, in a way you could hear that and think, oh, that's completely numbed out to the horrors of the world. But it wasn't where he was coming from. He's coming from a wisdom perspective of really understanding, the sort of, greed, hatred and delusion at the center of the wheel of life, that, it was very much from just understanding human nature. There's threat, there's closing down, there's fear, there's fighting back, that is the nature of things, that it's that's the nature of what's going on. And I think that would be a good example of really like not going into horrified anxiety, because it's just like, actually, that is what happens, and I can see that even to my response to some things, where it's just like, actually, this person, I have a friend particularly in a very difficult situation, and it's like there's a response of compassion and active helping, that's what I'm engaged in, but there isn't a horror or an anxiety, because it's like, actually, this is the product of conditions, and some of those conditions I can see. So it's like, I'm not horrified it's happened, and that actually enables me to be more useful. If you see does that make sense? Yeah.
There's a question online.
Thank you.
It doesn't say who it's from, but it's, can you say more about the transformation of the poison?
I mean, I think, again, this is best done sort of experientially, but I would really encourage people to have a go with it. I mean, one of the sort of most obvious examples that comes to mind is for example, when something difficult is going on and you sit down to meditate, or you sit down to meditate and realize something as difficult is going on, whichever way around that happens. But, and this is not a very recent example for me, but I remember at one point, sitting down, and there was a sort of a relationship difficulty thing going on, and I was sitting there, and it's like everything in my experience is rage and indignation. How can this be? This isn't fair. This isn't right. She said that. I said that. She said that. All of that. And but actually, and then within that meditation, and I, there's been other examples of this, but just the one that comes to mind, it's like, oh, that's interesting. We can always summon interest. That's the thing. You can't transform rage into joy or equanimity, but you can just be interested in it, if you remember to be. And I did at that moment remember to be, oh, that's interesting. I've got this huge hot, and I'm interested, and then go into the body. That's the way, that would be the way to do it. You take it into the body, and it's like in the body, it's just this huge hot ball of rage. But then it's just this huge hot ball. It doesn't even necessarily need that label, rage. It's just like, wow, that's really interesting. What a lot of energy, and it's hot, and it's red, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, actually, when you can keep the focus on a physical level in the body, it's like suddenly you find yourself thinking what to have for lunch. And it's just like, it's just gone, and it's gone in that moment, that's all that matters. It may be that hasn't solved that particular relationship dilemma, and it may be that it comes back, 30 seconds later, 3 hours later, 3 days later, or whatever. That's not the point, but in the moment is where we can work with anything. And so in the moment, in the body, and curiosity. And being aware that a lot of these things are energy, the energy can transform. I used to feel quite scared of energy, I just felt like, oh wow, if I was to release this, it would just run amok, and I would create damage, and I would be embarrassing, and I would be, all these things, whatever it is. And but then when you start sort of touching into it like that, and you think, oh, no, it's just energy, and actually keeping the energy down, diminishes or, keeps us trapped really in different cycles. So I'd recommend it to whoever that was online. So there's about 4 minutes more, 5 minutes more. Is there anything else anyone wants to share or ask? Nisha.
I have a bit of a story that if I actually go around and open up difficult situations, I won't be able to live the rest of my day or get anything done. Do you have any suggestions for that story apart from picking it apart, which obviously?
Yeah, I mean, it is really interesting. When I've touched into that more recently, and yeah, I mean, all of these things. When was I? And I'm just trying to think what situations I've given different examples in, but I think a lot of these things, the response would be, you don't need to do it all at once. Put a toe in the water and just see. Test that hypothesis, and so apologies if you've heard me give this analogy before, but this was again years and years ago on a meditation retreat. But it was on the Brahma Vihara, so we were looking at metta, karuna, mudita, upeksha, the sort of compassion, sympathetic joy, equanimity. And I'd got to the meditation retreat and realised I couldn't get off the starting blocks with metta because I just had this manhole cover in my chest and I just couldn't go below it. I couldn't feel anything. And I remember talking to one of the people leading the retreat about that. And they've said, well, basically, you don't need to just remove it. It's fine. Allow it to be there. Welcome it. Soften around it. Maybe you could shift it a tiny bit over, and just see what's there. So, and that I found really helpful. So that's what I mean. I don't think you need to just go into any situation, including really difficult ones, just completely open. But I have, I've had that. I don't know, for some reason recently I have ended up being more open in difficult situations and getting upset, But then it's just actually that's interesting too. And then what's it like to not close down to that, or just to think actually, there's pain, there's suffering, there's sadness, that I think that's what's happened for me as well, doing that, is that it transforms from maybe a sort of aversive reaction or a need to protect or that sort of horrified anxiety or a need to change or a need to solve, need to make it better. And it goes into much purer sort of sadness. It's like, actually, this is really sad. I wish this were other, And that's much more heart thing, isn't it? You can see that makes sense. Thank you. That's just coming up to half.